You want to put what in the quantum reactor? First Science Officer Talara's secondary breathing membranes fluttered in what her human colleagues had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. Pop rocks, replied Dr. Sarah Chen, maintaining perfect deadpan delivery as she adjusted her safety goggles. You know the candy that fizzes in your mouth? The tall, willowy alien blinked all four of her iridescent eyes in rapid succession. And your justification for this proposed experiment is… Well, Sarah began, adopting the tone she reserved for explaining particularly obvious concepts. We've been trying to stabilize the quantum fluctuations in the reactor core for months now. Nothing conventional has worked, but I was eating some pop rocks yesterday, and it hit me. The random crystalline structure combined with the pressurized carbon dioxide pockets creates a chaotic but predictable energy release pattern. If we scale it up and introduce it to the quantum field… Stop. Talara raised all three of her hands in surrender. Just stop. Have you at least run simulations? Oh, sure. Sarah brightened considerably. They all ended in catastrophic failure, but that's what makes it interesting. The simulations can't properly account for quantum-scale candy interactions. We'll never know unless we try. That, Talara declared, is the most human thing I have ever heard you say. And I was present for the Great Coffee Machine incident of 21 and 84. We agreed never to speak of that again, Sarah muttered. Besides, that was mostly Dave's fault. Who adds nitrous oxide to an espresso maker? The same species that apparently thinks introducing children's confectionery to experimental quantum physics is a reasonable course of action. Talara's tone managed to convey both deep affection and utter exasperation. Why must your kind always push boundaries in the most bizarre ways possible? Sarah shrugged, already pulling a large bag of pop rocks from her lab coat pocket. Because nobody else thinks to try. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? Talara's chromatic scales shifted to a pale lavender, the equivalent of a human going ghost white. Please do not say those words. The last time a human asked that question on this station, we had to evacuate 3 decks and file 17 regulatory variance reports. That was different, Sarah protested. Nobody could have predicted that the hamsters would achieve collective consciousness. The warning signs were there, Talara countered. They had already organized a rudimentary social hierarchy and were conducting primitive religious ceremonies with their exercise wheels. Ancient history, Sarah waved dismissively. This is pure science, probably. Before Talara could formulate another objection, Sarah had already begun pouring the pop rocks into the reactor's auxiliary intake port. The crystalline candies cascaded down like a shimmering waterfall of questionable decisions, disappearing into the quantum containment field with a sound that somehow managed to be both ominous and festive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the reactor core began to pulse with a soft pink glow. See? Sarah gestured triumphantly. Perfectly safe. The reactor hiccuped. There was no other word for it. The massive piece of cutting-edge technology actually hiccuped, sending a ripple of cherry-flavored quantum energy through the laboratory. Talara's scales shifted through several colors not normally found in nature. I should inform the station commander, she said faintly. Probably, Sarah agreed, watching with fascination as the reactor began to emit what appeared to be strawberry-scented quantum bubbles. But maybe wait until after we see what happens next? For science? Talara knew she should refuse. She knew she should immediately report this unauthorized experiment. She knew this violated at least 15 different safety protocols and probably several laws of physics. Instead, she found herself pulling up a chair next to Sarah, her scientific curiosity overcoming her better judgment. For science, she agreed reluctantly. But if we create another localized temporal anomaly, you're explaining it to the ethics committee this time. Deal, Sarah grinned, pulling out a notebook. Now watch this. I think the bubbles are starting to form primitive social structures. Word of the Pop Rocks incident, as it came to be known, spread quickly through the galactic scientific community. The results were, to put it mildly, unexpected. The quantum bubbles did indeed develop a primitive society, complete with its own economy based on flavor exchanges. They also demonstrated an unusual ability to solve complex mathematical equations, though they would only communicate their answers through elaborate interpretive dance routines. The ethics committee ultimately ruled that since the bubbles had achieved sapience through entirely natural, if unconventional means, they must be recognized as a new form of life. They now occupy their own dedicated habitat within the station, where they continue to expand their civilization and occasionally offer cryptic but surprisingly accurate stock market predictions. Sarah Chen was simultaneously banned from handling any form of candy in a laboratory setting and awarded the prestigious Galactic Science Innovation Prize. The citation read, in part, for achievements in the field of quantum confectionery physics, and for demonstrating that sometimes asking what's the worst that could happen can lead to revolutionary discoveries, despite the objections of more sensible species. The incident might have remained an isolated case of human scientific eccentricity, were it not for what happened 3 months later in the station's hydroponics lab. Absolutely not, Dr. Marcus Wong declared, crossing his arms and glaring at the assembled group of eager human interns. We are not introducing Mexican jumping beans to the gravity control systems. But Dr. Wong, protested Jessica Martinez, the team's youngest member. Think about the applications. If we can harness the bean's natural motion-generating properties and amplify them through the artificial gravity field, we could revolutionize space travel. The last time someone tried to revolutionize something on this station, we ended up with a civilization of quantum bubbles that keep trying to teach calculus to the maintenance robots through interpretive dance, Marcus pointed out. Exactly, Jessica beamed. And look how well that turned out. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. The bubbles have started a religion based on string theory and carbonation. Last week they tried to convert the coffee machine. But they were right about those stock market predictions, another intern chimed in. My cousin made a fortune following their advice. The fact that your argument in favor of this experiment relies on the success of a previous disaster is exactly why it shouldn't happen, Marcus said firmly. What's all this about jumping beans? A new voice asked. Marcus turned to see Station Commander Rodriguez entering the hydroponics lab, accompanied by the station's chief of security, a massive Urloran named Grax whose species resembled nothing so much as a heavily armored space rhinoceros. Nothing, Marcus said quickly. We want to use Mexican jumping beans to create a new form of gravity drive, Jessica announced simultaneously. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Interesting. And how exactly would that work? Marcus watched in horror as Jessica launched into an enthusiastic explanation involving quantum entanglement, sympathetic motion amplification, and what she called chaos theory applied to legume locomotion. The worst part was that her theory, while completely insane, actually made a certain kind of sense. Absolutely fascinating, Rodriguez mused when she finished. Grax, what do you think? The Urloran security chief, who had been silent throughout the presentation, shifted his considerable bulk thoughtfully. From a security perspective, this proposal presents numerous concerns. The potential for gravitational anomalies alone would require significant safety measures. He paused. However, I must admit I am curious to see what would happen. Et tu, Grax? Marcus muttered. Oh, come on, Dr. Wong, Jessica pleaded. What's the worst that could happen? The entire room went silent. Even Rodriguez winced slightly. You had to say it, Marcus sighed. You actually had to say those words. I don't understand, Grax rumbled. Is this some human taboo? Those exact words, Rodriguez explained, have preceded some of the most memorable disasters in human history. They're practically an invitation for chaos. And yet, the commander continued with a gleam in his eye that Marcus found deeply concerning. They've also preceded some of our greatest discoveries. I'm authorizing the experiment. Under extremely controlled conditions, he added quickly, seeing Marcus's expression. With full safety protocols in place, and this time we're evacuating the deck first. And that was how, despite Marcus's continued protests, Project Jumping Bean was officially launched. The results, as with most human experiments that began with those fateful words, were both spectacular and completely unexpected. The good news was that Jessica's basic theory proved correct. The bean's motion, when properly amplified through the gravity control systems, did indeed create a unique form of propulsion. The bad news was that the effect wasn't limited to spacecraft. The first sign that something had gone wrong, or right, depending on your perspective, came when several members of the hydroponics staff reported that their plants were attempting to dance. Not just sway or move, but actually dance. Complex choreographed routines that seemed to be synchronized across different species and sections of the lab. It's remarkable, Jessica declared, watching a row of tomato plants perform what appeared to be a perfect can-can routine. The gravitational field must have somehow merged with the plant's natural tropism responses. Remarkable is not the word I would use, Marcus grumbled, ducking as a particularly enthusiastic cucumber vine attempted to execute a pirouette. How do we stop it? Stop it? Jessica looked scandalized. But think of the possibilities. We could revolutionize agriculture. Imagine farms where the crops harvest themselves through interpretive dance. I'm more concerned about the fact that the lettuce has started forming chorus lines, Marcus pointed out. And has anyone else noticed that the potatoes seem to be organizing some sort of botanical Broadway musical? He was right. The potatoes, displaying a previously unknown talent for theatrical production, had somehow convinced the other root vegetables to join them in what appeared to be an underground, literally, performance of Little Shop of Horrors. The situation reached its peak when the station's artificial gravity began to hiccup in rhythm with the plants' performances, causing the entire deck to occasionally break into spontaneous dance numbers. The final straw came when a delegation from the Quantum Bubble Civilization arrived to critique the plant's choreography and offer suggestions for improving their quantum harmony through better rhythm. In the end, the experiment was officially classified as a qualified success with interpretive complications. The dancing plants were quarantined in their own section of the hydroponics lab, where they continue to perform several shows daily. The potatoes' production of Little Shop of Horrors received rave reviews from several galactic critics, though some complained that the casting of actual plants in all roles was a bit on the nose. Jessica Martinez received both a formal reprimand and a research grant to explore alternative applications of botanical kinetics. The grant came with the strict condition that any future experiments must be conducted in a separate facility with reinforced gravity plating and a dedicated dance floor. The third incident, which finally led to the official ban on humans asking, "What's the worst that could happen?" in any scientific context, involved the station's chief engineer, a box of rubber bands, and an ill-advised attempt to solve the station's waste management problems. Chief Engineer Dave Peterson, yes, the same Dave from the coffee machine incident, had always maintained that simple solutions were often the best. This philosophy had served him well throughout his career, though it had also led to the creation of several new safety regulations specifically named after him. The problem, he explained to his assembled team, which included both human and alien engineers, is that we're thinking too complexly about waste disposal. We don't need fancy matter converters or molecular recyclers. What we need is this. He held up a rubber band. "I don't understand," said Kizd, a Ventaxian engineer whose species resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a supercomputer. "How will an elastic band solve our waste management issues?" "Simple," Dave grinned. "We use the rubber bands to create a massive slingshot system. We compress the waste into compact pods, load them up, and launch them directly into the sun." The room was silent for a long moment. "There are," Kizd began carefully, "approximately 73 immediate problems with that proposal. Would you like me to list them alphabetically or in order of potential catastrophic outcome?" "But think about it," Dave insisted. "It's elegant, it's efficient, it's—" "A violation of at least 12 different space waste disposal regulations," interrupted Assistant Chief Engineer Maria Santos. "Not to mention the basic laws of physics." "Laws of physics are more like guidelines anyway," Dave said dismissively. "Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" The entire engineering team groaned in unison. "You said the words," Maria sighed. "You actually said the words. After everything that's happened on this station, you went and said those exact words." "I still don't see what everyone's so worried about," Dave muttered, already beginning to construct his prototype rubber band launcher. What happened next would later be described in the official report as a cascade of improbable events leading to an outcome that defied both physical laws and common sense. The unofficial report, written by Maria, simply stated, "Dave happened. Again." The rubber band launcher actually worked, sort of. It successfully launched the first waste pod, directly into a previously undiscovered spatial anomaly that had chosen that exact moment to manifest just outside the station. The anomaly, apparently having a sense of humor, replaced the waste pod with an identical pod made entirely of rubber bands. This might have been merely annoying, except that the rubber band pod turned out to be sentient and reproductive. Within hours, the station was dealing with an infestation of self-replicating rubber band organisms that showed an unfortunate tendency to snap themselves at passing crew members while making sounds that could only be described as giggling. "Fascinating," declared Dr. Chen, who had been called in to study the phenomenon. "They appear to be exhibiting playful behavior. And look, they're starting to form complex geometric patterns." "They're building a nest in the ventilation system," Maria pointed out of more rubber bands, which they're somehow creating from thin air. "Yes, but they're building it in a mathematically perfect hexagonal pattern," Sarah countered. "The quantum bubbles are very impressed. They've already established diplomatic relations." The situation reached its crisis point when the rubber band organisms discovered the station's internal mail system and began using it as a transportation network, ambushing unsuspecting crew members with tiny rubber band projectiles before disappearing into the tubes with what everyone swore were sounds of mischievous laughter. The final straw came when they somehow gained access to the station's internal communication system and began sending messages composed entirely of elastic-based puns. The quantum bubbles found this hilarious. No one else did. It took 3 weeks, 14 emergency meetings, and one very bizarre negotiating session, mediated by the quantum bubbles, to reach a solution. The rubber band organisms were eventually persuaded to relocate to an uninhabited space station where they could evolve and reproduce without causing chaos in inhabited areas. They agreed, on the condition that they be supplied with a regular shipment of office supplies to experiment with. Dave was simultaneously promoted for discovering a new form of life, and demoted for causing yet another station-wide crisis. His new position came with the title Innovation Specialist, and the strict requirement that all his future projects be conducted in a separate facility equipped with multiple containment fields and a dedicated rubber band disposal unit. The final incident, which led to the galactic-wide ban on those 5 fateful words, didn't actually take place on the station at all. It happened during a routine diplomatic meeting on Earth, where representatives from various alien species had gathered to discuss technological exchange programs. The human delegation, led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the station commander, was presenting a proposal for sharing advanced propulsion technology. The alien representatives were understandably nervous, given humanity's recent track record with experimental technology. "I assure you," Elena said smoothly, "we have thoroughly tested all these systems. They're completely safe." "Like the quantum candy experiment was safe?" asked the Ventaxian representative. "Or the dancing plants? Or the rubber band incident?" "Those were unexpected successes," Elena replied diplomatically. "But this is different. We're not experimenting here. These are proven technologies." "Then you won't mind if we run our own tests first," said Talara, who was representing her species at the meeting, "just to be sure." "Of course not," Elena agreed. "What's the worst that could happen?" The entire alien delegation gasped. Several representatives immediately began backing away from the table. Talara's scales cycled through every color in the visible spectrum, and several that weren't. "She said it," someone whispered. "She actually said it." "Now really," Elena protested, "you're all overreacting. Those words aren't actually magical. They don't actually cause things to go wrong." At that exact moment, as if the universe itself had been waiting for those words, a small experimental quantum drive in the building's basement chose to hiccup. Later investigation would reveal that it had somehow established contact with both the quantum bubble civilization and the rubber band organisms. The results were interesting. The entire conference center began to vibrate in harmony with what witnesses would later describe as the universe's attempt at scat singing. The quantum field fluctuations, amplified by the rubber band organism's natural elasticity, created a cascade of improbable events that rippled outward from the building. First, all the potted plants in the conference room began to dance. Not the coordinated choreography of the station's hydroponics lab, but wild, free-form jazz movements that suggested they were making it up as they went along. Several ferns performed what appeared to be interpretive tributes to quantum mechanics. Then the building's artificial gravity started to hiccup in rhythm with the plant's movements. But instead of the simple up and down fluctuations everyone had come to expect from gravity malfunctions, it began to loop, twist, and occasionally tie itself into Klein bottles. "Well," Elena said weakly, watching as a delegation of quantum bubbles materialized in the corner of the room and began setting up what appeared to be a physics-defying jazz club. "This is new." "New?" Talara's scales had settled into a pattern that somehow managed to visually represent jazz music. "This is exactly what we were afraid of. Every time humans say those words, reality itself decides to get creative." "To be fair," Elena pointed out, ducking as a rubber band organism swung past wearing what appeared to be a tiny fedora, "you have to admit, our disasters tend to have surprisingly positive outcomes." She had a point. The quantum bubbles had already set up their club, complete with a stage where several rubber band organisms were performing what they claimed was a quantum physics-inspired bebop number. The plants had organized themselves into sections, rhythm, brass, and woodwinds, though how the ferns were managing to play saxophone was anybody's guess. The gravity fluctuations had settled into a surprisingly pleasant swing rhythm, and several of the more adventurous alien delegates had discovered that with proper timing, they could use the loops and twists to perform physics-defying dance moves. "This is completely unprecedented," declared the Ventaxian representative, who was somehow managing to take notes despite the fact that their paper kept trying to join in the dance numbers. "We're simultaneously observing violations of physics, biology, and several local noise ordinances." "Yes, but look how much fun everyone's having." Elena gestured to the impromptu party that had broken out. The quantum bubbles had started teaching advanced particle physics through jazz solos, and surprisingly, it seemed to be working better than traditional teaching methods. "That's not the point," Talara insisted, though she was having trouble maintaining her stern expression while her scales unconsciously played along with the rhythm section. "The point is that humans consistently cause the impossible to happen just by asking what's the worst that could happen." "And has any of it actually been the worst?" Elena asked reasonably. "Yes, we keep causing reality to hiccup in unexpected ways. But look at the results. We've discovered new forms of life, revolutionized several fields of science, and now we're literally learning quantum mechanics through jazz. Are these really disasters?" Before Talara could respond, a group of rubber band organisms, now wearing tiny bow ties, bounced up to present the preliminary results of their collaboration with the quantum bubbles. They had, apparently, solved several major problems in quantum physics through the medium of musical mathematics. Their solution, when translated from jazz notation back into standard mathematical formulae, turned out to be both elegant and revolutionary. The fact that it occasionally caused nearby objects to break into spontaneous dance numbers was, they insisted, a feature rather than a bug. The incident finally ended when the quantum drive in the basement, having achieved a state of perfect harmony with both the jazz performance and the laws of physics, simply transcended normal space-time. It left behind a thank you note written in musical notation and a set of equations that, when solved, played a perfect blues riff. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council faced a dilemma. On one hand, the incident had proven beyond doubt that allowing humans to ask, "What's the worst that could happen?" inevitably led to reality-bending chaos. On the other hand, that chaos had consistently resulted in significant scientific advances, albeit in forms that no one could have predicted. Their solution was a compromise. Humans would be officially banned from uttering those 5 words in any scientific or technological context. However, a new research facility would be established specifically for what was termed improbability engineering, a field of study that embraced the chaos that seemed to follow human scientific endeavors. The facility, naturally, was staffed primarily by humans, with advisory committees made up of quantum bubbles, rubber band organisms, and dancing plants. All major breakthroughs were announced through jazz performances, and the cafeteria maintained a permanent supply of pop rocks, though they were strictly controlled and could only be used in designated quantum-shielded areas. As for Elena Rodriguez, she was appointed the facility's first director, with Talara as her deputy, the alien scientist having finally admitted that while humans caused chaos, they also made the universe a far more interesting place. Their first official act was to install a sign above the main entrance reading, "Sometimes the worst that could happen turns out to be the best thing possible." The quantum bubbles insisted on adding a jazz soundtrack to the sign. Nobody argued. Years later, when asked about humanity's unique approach to scientific discovery, Talara would simply shake her head, her scales shifting through patterns that somehow managed to convey both exasperation and fondness. "Humans," she would explain to curious young scientists, "have a special talent for asking precisely the wrong questions in exactly the right way. They don't just think outside the box, they question why the box exists, then turn it into a quantum jazz club run by sentient rubber bands." "But why do they keep doing it?" the students would ask. "Because," she would reply, her scales dancing with amused resignation, "they never stop wondering what's the worst that could happen. And somehow, they keep proving that the worst possibilities often lead to the best discoveries." She would pause then, watching as a group of quantum bubbles performed their daily physics lecture through interpretive dance, accompanied by a jazz quartet of office supplies that had recently achieved consciousness after exposure to a particularly energetic rubber band performance. "Just don't tell them I said that," she would add. "They're impossible enough already." And somewhere in the facility, a human scientist would look at a completely ordinary object, tilt their head thoughtfully, and begin to wonder. 1 year later. The Galactic Scientific Council's quarterly meeting was proceeding with its usual methodical efficiency until Dr. Sarah Chen took the podium. Several delegates immediately checked their emergency evacuation procedures. "Distinguished colleagues," Sarah began, adjusting her newly awarded Galactic Science Innovation Medallion, "I'm pleased to report that the Improbability Engineering Research Facility has exceeded all expectations in its first year of operation." She activated a holoprojector, which displayed a series of graphs and charts. Several of them appeared to be dancing in perfect synchronization with background music that only quantum physicists could hear. Our collaboration with the quantum bubble civilization has led to breakthrough developments in faster-than-light travel, though we're still working on preventing the ships from spontaneously breaking into musical numbers during jump sequences. A murmur went through the audience. The recent test flights had been spectacular successes, even if passengers did occasionally find themselves participating in impromptu chorus lines through hyperspace. The rubber band organisms have revolutionized our understanding of elastic quantum states, leading to new developments in energy storage and transmission. Yes, the occasional snap and giggle incidents continue, but we've found they actually improve efficiency by keeping the engineers alert. Talara, now serving as the facility's chief of improbability management, stepped forward to present the safety statistics. Her scales rippled with professional pride as she detailed how they'd managed to reduce unexpected reality fluctuations by nearly 40%, while maintaining what she termed controlled chaos optimization. We've even established a promising cultural exchange program, Sarah continued. The dancing plants have been touring major galactic performance venues. Their production of Quantum Physics, the musical, has broken all previous attendance records. The critics particularly praised the existential solo performed by a philosophical cactus. She paused, allowing the council to absorb this information. However, our most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the facility's cafeteria. Several council members tensed visibly. It turns out that when you combine quantum bubble physics, rubber band elasticity, and choreographed plant movement with standard cafeteria food, something remarkable happens. We're still not entirely sure how, but we've accidentally created a new form of sustainable fusion reactor powered by Tuesday's Mystery Meat Special. The only side effect, she added quickly, seeing the alarm on several faces, is that the energy output occasionally manifests as food critic reviews delivered in interpretive dance. We're working on that. Well, actually, we're considering patenting it as a feature. Talara stepped in smoothly as she noticed Sarah reaching for a familiar candy package. Before my colleague can ask what's the worst that could happen, which she knows is strictly prohibited, I should mention that we've already scheduled next week's controlled chaos experiments, all involving proper safety protocols and pre-approved levels of improbability. Sarah nodded, trying not to look disappointed as she tucked the pop rocks back into her pocket. Right, of course. Though I still think my theory about quantum-enhanced candy floss has merit. No, the entire council said in unison. Fine, Sarah sighed. But you have to admit, humanity's peculiar approach to scientific discovery has produced remarkable results. She gestured to a window where, visible in the distance, a quantum bubble jazz quartet was teaching advanced theoretical physics to a group of graduate students through what appeared to be a combination of bebop and string theory. The rubber band organisms had set up an accompanying percussion section, using office supplies that had achieved consciousness during last week's minor probability fluctuation. We may not always know what we're doing, Sarah concluded, but we've certainly gotten better at managing the chaos that follows. And isn't that what science is really about? Well, that and occasionally creating sentient office supplies. Talara's scales shifted into what humans had learned to recognize as her fondly exasperated pattern. I believe what Dr. Chen is trying to say is that we've successfully institutionalized humanity's unique approach to scientific discovery, while maintaining acceptable levels of reality stability. Mostly acceptable, Sarah muttered. Mostly acceptable, Talara agreed, her scales briefly playing what sounded suspiciously like a rim shot. And perhaps that's the greatest breakthrough of all. We've learned that sometimes the most significant discoveries come not from asking what could go wrong, but from being prepared for anything to go right in the most unexpected ways possible. As if to emphasize her point, the quantum fusion reactor in the facility's basement chose that moment to begin humming what was unmistakably a jazz interpretation of the laws of thermodynamics. The council members found themselves nodding along, suddenly understanding quantum mechanics with perfect clarity. Sarah couldn't help grinning. They hadn't exactly stopped causing chaos. They'd just gotten better at making it work for them. And somehow that felt like the most human achievement of all. The end, really this time.